Since it first appeared only 150 years ago, plastic rapidly found its way into almost every aspect of our lives. It has driven our economy, redefined our culture and way of life, and influenced our politics. But more than that, from day one, plastic was inseparable from capitalism. Its rise to grandeur moved through monopolistic government contracts and the interests of the free market, aggressive advertising and marketing tricks, individual entrepreneurs and massive corporations, chemists and designers. Plastic begins with capitalist motivations. It was a $10,000 prize competition that led John Wesley Hyatt to invent the first man-made polymer, celluloid. A small company in Albany was struggling with the ecological challenge of a depleting resource, the ivory used to make billiard balls. Hyatt, accepting the challenge, spent more than 5 years in his lab, and finally came up with a truly infinite material, one we would never run out of, and that could imitate the aesthetics and attributes of nature. This was followed by the invention of Bakelite by Belgian entrepreneur Leo Baekeland, which introduced petroleum to plastic and paved the way for an endless array of types and qualities of plastic. After an intense period of production and innovation during World War II, plastic found its way into our hearts through the countless products it made possible. From paint to cars, from combs to houses, it captured the imagination of architects, designers, fashion houses, and pop icons. Plastic has come to symbolize the triumph of man, of science over nature.
There are plastics in your toaster, in the blender and the clock, in the lamp and in the roaster, on the door and in the lock.
But this wasn't destiny or pure chance. More than anything, it was the large chemical companies, those who made plastic, that really promoted it. Seeing the new possibilities it held and the massive market potential, they worked hard at getting everybody excited about plastic, from children to old people, from the happy housewife to the working man. Beyond products, these companies propagated the idea of the material, and packaged with it was the promise of a better, cleaner, easier, more colorful life. This unique collaboration involving scientists, designers, advertisers, and big business helped plastic find its place everywhere. We were lucky. We were living with the quintessential material of the future.
Just one word.
Yes, sir.
Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Plastics.
The promise of plastic was not to last forever. We soon found out that we were too enthusiastic too soon. Thanks to the mass production of plastic and our appetite for it, we are now drowning in it. Beginning in the 1970s and escalating through the 90s, the true consequences of this material came to light. Plastic now came to symbolize capitalism's hidden evils: excess production, blind consumerism, exploitation of developing countries, cheapness and disposability, and, more than anything else, man's heavy footprint on nature. We all hear about these consequences, about the plastic soup in the ocean, waste that does not disintegrate, a dramatic impact on the planet's ecosystem. Plastic's triumph was too complete. Climbing up the food chain from small fish in the ocean, it first entered our homes and now finds its way into our bodies. In 2014, small rocks discovered on the shores of Hawaii turned out to be a new type of geological sediment, plastiglomerate, a natural rock comprised of solids of volcanic origin, sand, shells, and plastic. Now, a new technology offers plastic another future, a technology that implies a new type of consumption. Plastic is at the heart of this technology. 3D printing holds the potential to turn things around, to make plastic sustainable, even if not always in the ways we imagine. Instead of mass production, 3D printing offers singular production with no excess manufacturing. Instead of global production, it offers local, even domestic production, reducing the tremendous ecological cost of transport. Instead of blind consumerism, it offers conscious and active user involvement that allows us to use and care for our products longer. Instead of knowing nothing about the raw materials that make our world, we can become consumers and even makers of raw material. 3D printing can create a new consumption model and transform plastic from an ecological threat into an ecological promise. But like we've learned from the history of plastic, this future is not predestined. "3D printing is an industry in the making. For some people, it holds a new, open, socially revolutionary potential. For others, it reinforces old capitalist mechanisms. Which of the two will it be?" For big business, things are clear. 3D printing is lifestyle. It is a happy family sitting in the living room. 3D printing is fashion. It is an avant-garde shoe, a decadent piece of jewelry. 3D printing is pop. Bracelets, robots, iPhone covers.
This machine prints in post-consumer plastic. That means you could take this water bottle and print bracelets, robots, vases, shoes.
But the industry does more than promote products and lifestyles. It also changes the way we talk about the material. Instead of nylon powder, we now have strong and flexible plastic. Instead of alumide, we now have metallic plastic. In other words, attributes replace materials, and the users know less and less. It is an industry with no set standards, and for brands, this fact is a chance to be those who define these new standards. MakerBot, the world's largest producer of desktop 3D printers, has started selling high-impact polystyrene, or HIPS, as MakerBot Dissolvable Filament. For MakerBot printer owners, it might prove a logical choice, much like buying HP ink for your HP printer. Raw materials are now a new consumer market, and marketing will sell them. It's an old game in a new field, and it will be defined by the way it's propagated. The open source movement is based on sharing knowledge. While big companies take a leading role in communicating 3D printing to the public as a new lifestyle, other forces are trying to transform consumers into users and to empower them with an understanding of materials. Academics, designers, and amateur makers are moving out of wiki sites and internal discussion groups and developing new tools, new materials, and new ways of communication. A university lab is publishing recipes for new materials for 3D printing made of common ingredients. Open source websites offer the possibility to explore, learn, negotiate, and discuss materials. Designers are exploring and experimenting with the creation of hybrids and new materials. Some makers even imagine a new model of open material testing, one that will not only inform us the qualities of a brand or material, but also create an ever-growing open consumer database, community-based standards. These initiatives propose a participatory model rather than a one-sided communication model. They're built on an idea of community, and they imagine 3D printing not only as open design, expanding the possibilities of form, but also as open production, expanding the possibilities of making. This thinking is not only commercially revolutionary, but socially radical. In 1961, former American President Eisenhower gave his final words of warning to the nation.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
he might as well have been talking about plastic. The links between government, military, and industry gave a dramatic push to plastic in its infancy. Take, for instance, chemical company DuPont's contract to produce all nylon for American parachutes during World War II. It gave a tremendous boost to the company's production, finance, and research, and there are many more such examples. The government is always part of the game, and it's very interested in the potential of 3D printing.
Last year, we created our first Manufacturing Innovation Institute in Youngstown, Ohio. The once shuttered warehouse is now a state-of-the-art lab where new workers are mastering 3D printing that has the potential to revolutionize the way we make almost everything. There's no reason this can't happen in other towns. So tonight, I'm announcing the launch of 3 more of these manufacturing hubs, where businesses will partner with the Department of Defense and Energy to turn regions left behind by globalization into global centers of high-tech jobs.
Obama's statement was followed by the establishment of the National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Institute, which was quickly renamed as the more catchy American Makes. The institute, which promotes innovation and advancement in 3D printing, is connecting academies, government agencies, and businesses in order to push the industry forward. America Makes is also heavily funded by the Department of Defense. The U.S. government is investing in 3D printing, from digital manufacturing labs in Afghanistan to collaboration with students and companies to print drones. From 3D printed gas masks to NASA commercial contracts for printing in space. There is an inherent interest for the government and military to adopt, control, and regulate the 3D printing industry. After all, it has always created and regulated new technologies and determined when they reach the marketplace. The GPS, the personal computer, and the internet, to name a few. But this time, it might be too late. The tools to develop complex technologies are already in other hands. The military is no longer alone in promoting new technology. As technology and its components are distributed, they become harder to control.
Today, what we've created is a universal autopilot. It's a box. It costs $170. And you put this box in any vehicle and it becomes autonomous, fully autonomous. An airplane, a helicopter, a multicopter, a car, a boat. This has never existed before. It's never existed because the government never asked for it.
Take the booming industry of civilian drones, for example. These cheap devices, used by farmers, directors, and amateurs, can be easily bought or made. Because drones are easy to assemble and modify, 3D printing is a very popular tool to make them. This is a happy civilian prospect. However, the unspoken danger of drones is always present.
Can a mail-order drone from a kit even handle the stress of rounds cycling through a gun? Is it accurate? Let's find out.
"3D printing offers a real regulatory and legislative challenge, but it's something that legislators have not prepared for. That's why Cody Wilson, who made the 3D printed gun, could do it in broad daylight. His work was completely legal because the law was not ready for such situations. And not only weapons. Other legal gray areas we know from the internet are starting to surface in the material world. Copyright issues we knew from the music industry are now becoming product design issues. Regulated technologies like medical equipment are now being spread out through open source initiatives. The possibility to manufacture professional, high-precision content is no longer centralized. All these new questions and more out there because home production cannot be regulated. Lawyers may send letters like they did in the music industry. Some people may be punished, but they can't stop everyone. Yet, if production were centralized in service centers, and the model of home production became marginal, we would be easier to control. How the technology is applied, if it's inside or outside the home, serves deeper interests. "3D printing is a profitable business."
3D printing, I love it.
Cover stories on 3D printing. This, of course, is all the rage right now.
It's expected to increase fourfold in the next 6 years and will be worth tens of billions of dollars. And some companies are aiming for a big slice of the action. In today's world of 3D printing, two companies lead the way: 3D Systems and Stratasys, and their key strategy is mergers and acquisitions. In fact, 3D Systems bought dozens of companies in the last 6 years. These companies represent the entire production chain, companies that supply raw materials, printer manufacturers, service providers, software companies. Whether these are huge companies like Cimatron or printers that can print chocolate, this strategy aims to kill the competition, turning the market into a duopoly. These acquisitions concern not only companies, but also patents, and patents are enforced. Stratasys sues Alfinia, 3D Systems sues Formlabs, DSM sues 3D Systems. When patents expire, other mechanisms come into play. Machines need specific material by the same brand in order to work. Centralized factory-like models dilute the idea of distributed production. Printers require no understanding on the part of the user, just a blind trust in the brand.
When we started MakerBot, we knew we were going to be open source hardware. We were inspired by Arduino, and I think this is something we learn as kids, that sharing is good. When you share something, you get more back from it, but we forget this as adults. So with open source hardware, we're back to that.
Companies that pioneered open source printing are now closing their gates. MakerBot, the open source project that turned into the biggest manufacturer of desktop 3D printers, is now a completely closed source. It has also been purchased by Stratasys for $450 million. The 3D printing industry is increasingly sounding more familiar and less like an economic revolution.
It makes the world go round.
Wow. I'm printing with the filament that I extruded. And it's working!
The open source community is still active. It's alive on websites, blogs, and YouTube. It issues DIY instructions and how-to videos. It reports and exposes the moves of big companies. It has its own agenda as to where 3D printing might be headed.
Makers and 3D printer users all over the world are currently outraged by patents recently filed by Stratasys' own MakerBot.
Some people in the open source community are also promoting one radical idea: shredding printed products at home and reusing the material to make new products. This is, at least in part, a feasible idea. You can now buy or make machines that turn plastic into raw material. This idea is not only ecologically radical, but also economically radical. It bypasses the economic cycle of a printed plastic product, from chemical companies to design software to 3D printing facilities. Even if this ideal is only partly possible, it marks a trajectory for the future. Designers, makers, and entrepreneurs are exploring new models and services, and even new materials, tying these big questions together: an economic model, an ecological awareness, a political reorganization, and ethical obligation. It's these communities that can face up to the big corporations, and in between their conflicting agendas, we all stand. Will 3D printing be old capitalism in new clothes? Or will it lead a new consumption model, and with it, a new future for plastic? As the lines are being drawn, the choices we make as consumers, the products and services we offer as designers, the models we imagine as entrepreneurs, and the laws and regulations we make as politicians, these will define the fate of the 3D printing industry. Where do you see the future of plastic? What will you do about it?